In this review, we're going to be looking at Man's Best Chicken. Now, Man's Best has been getting its name out there lately. It's a local Australian brand and they source their ingredients locally as well. So that's really nice to hear, and we like to support Australian brands where possible. So let's have a look at the top 5 ingredients. Now, why we look at the top 5 ingredients is because these are your predominant ingredients, because ingredients are listed on the ingredient panel from largest to smallest in descending order, and as always before cooking. Okay, so number 1 is chicken meal. So we have meat as our very first ingredient, which is great. Number 2 is peas. Although typically I wouldn't like to see peas as the second ingredient, I'm not overly concerned at this point because of how much of the protein is being derived from meat, and we're going to come to that shortly. Okay, so your starch is your tapioca in number 3. This is a kibble and starch is required to bind kibble. It just has to be there, okay? Now, it can come in a lot of different variations, but tapioca isn't a terrible one, so we're just going to go with it. Next on the ingredient list is chicken fat. It's nice to see that chicken fat and chicken meal, so the protein and the fat are the same, although the fat isn't going to be an issue anyway with dogs that have protein intolerances or allergies. Chicken fat is a nice nutritious fat, and the fat is coming from an animal source, so we like that. Now the last of the top 5 is flaxseed. So this is a nice addition as well. There is some concern regarding flaxseed in some communities regarding reproduction, as is their peas. I have actually written an article about this before, which I will link to in this discussion. At this time, from the science that is available, I don't see any cause for concern regarding peas and flaxseed, depending of course on what level that they are actually in a kibble. For example, there is one Australian kibble that the first ingredient is pea. That is not something that I would recommend, not only because of perhaps fertility issues, perceived problems with fertility, but because it's not a species appropriate ingredient to be the number 1 ingredient, okay? I was super interested when I was doing this breakdown how similar Man's Best and one of Black Hawk's range is to each other. All their ingredients are the same except for the 5th ingredient. So Man's Best does a better job having flaxseed there, and Black Hawk has potato. But how interesting that they are incredibly similar. But because Black Hawk has that potato there, their carbohydrate count is a lot higher. Man's Best has done an awesome job keeping their carbs quite low, and that's pretty impressive for a kibble. Alright, let's have a look at the guaranteed analysis. First up is crude protein, which is 37% minimum. I would ideally like to see the true protein amount versus the crude protein. Next up, I should probably actually take a step back and say 37%. I'm very happy with that, especially because such a large amount of their protein is being derived from meat, which we're about to go into. Next up is their fat at 19%. Look, ideally, I would have liked to have seen a higher fat count, but hey, it's still a reasonable amount of fat as well. Their crude fiber is 5%. Fiber is generally between 3 and 5%, so maybe theirs is slightly higher. Moisture is 10%, which is perfectly normal. Calcium 2 and phosphorus 1.4. Now this is an adult formula, so I'm not overly concerned with the calcium and phosphorus ratio. Okay, so the energy is 325 per 100 grams. That's pretty good. You're not going to need to feed a huge amount of it. And the salt is 1% max, which is very standard in kibbles. Now, regardless of what it says in the ingredient panel, this is where it all comes down to. How much meat is actually in this product. Now, this is something that you'll not find in the ingredient panel, and you'll not find anywhere on the packaging unless the company choose to state it, and sometimes even if they do choose to state it on the packaging, it's actually misleading. So what I did, I went ahead and contacted Man's Best and asked them, from their protein percent of 37% protein, how much is actually being derived from meat? Their response was 75%, which is an awesome amount. Now, this is where people get confused. When they see the 75% meat, they often think, okay, well, 75% of the bag is actually meat. No, that's not how it works, because 37% is protein. Of that 37%, 75% is originating from meat. Now, the kibbles that fit into my top tier breakdowns that I'm really happy with are kibbles that are over 70% meat. So this Man's Best is in my top tier for recommended kibbles, so they do a really lovely job. Okay, one thing that we don't know from the ingredient level or how much meat is in the kibble is the quality of all the ingredients. That's something that we just don't know, and we can't know unless the company actually produces that information. Okay, so from what I can see, Man's Best is a lovely kibble. I have no issues recommending it to people who want to feed a kibble diet. As like all kibble diets, I do recommend that you add fresh food to it. So you would go ahead and weigh out what you need to feed your dog, calculate 20% of the weight of that food, take that out and chuck in some fresh food. Okay, most kibbles generally allow 20% of added extras without unbalancing their food at all. So adding fresh meat, this is a chicken kibble, so you probably like to add some chicken to it, like some real chicken, some fruit and vegetables that are either mashed or lightly cooked, finely chopped or grated, because when we feed fruit and vegetables, we need to be able to break down the cell wall so our dogs can actually absorb nutrients. I'd also recommend adding a probiotic, so whether that's a commercial probiotic or something you make at home, such as Kefir. All right, so this gets a thumbs up from me. I'm more than happy with this Australian brand, and I look forward to seeing them become more available across the board. All right, thanks for tuning in today, and if you feed Man's Best, post below, let us know what you think of it.